Today I'm sharing 5 photos, and while some of them may appear normal, they all have tragic backstories that will make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. On the evening of Thursday, February 20th, 2003, American rock band Great White was set to perform at the Station nightclub in West Warwick, Rhode Island. Little did the platinum-selling group know that this would become their most memorable show to date, but for the worst reason imaginable. Many eager concert-goers never made it out alive on that fateful night. Now, for those who aren't familiar, West Warwick is a working-class former mill town that rarely, and by rarely I mean never, saw its name on major headlines. Yet it was in this unassuming borough that swarms of locals crowded into the Station nightclub, hoping to jam out to some 80s hits. However, not everyone was thrilled about the abundance of nightlife, namely a man named Barry Warner. You see, his house sat directly behind the station, and he wasn't shy about filing noise complaints against the nightclub. So when the Durdarians took over, they decided to take matters into their own hands by paying Warner a visit at his home. They promised to control the commotion by installing soundproof material, and coincidentally, Warner worked for a company that sold polyurethane foam. So they sweetened the deal by purchasing their insulation through him and promptly put it up all over the interior of the building. But as you'll soon see, that choice would forever haunt the Durdarian brothers. Now, where were we? Yes, it was your typical New England winter night outside, with freezing temperatures and snowbanks lining the icy roads. But inside the packed nightclub, 462 enthusiastic patrons pushed ahead to get a glimpse of the stage and order drinks at the bar. In a radio interview from earlier that day, Jack Russell of Great White had said it was going to be a killer show. But of course, those words would take on a much more ominous meaning once the night was over. Shortly after 11 o'clock and just seconds into the Great White's opening song, Desert Moon, the band's tour manager, Daniel Bakley, set off 4 large fireworks called pyrotechnic gerbs. As a result, white sparks began flying through the air, at first adding to the crowd's excitement. But that quickly changed to chaos and confusion as the walls on either side of the stage went up in flames. Within a matter of seconds, the fire had spread along the foam insulation, completely engulfing the interior of the building. At this point, the fire alarms had been activated, and just 20 seconds after the pyrotechnics ended, the band and entourage members fled for the west exit by the stage. Despite 4 possible exit routes, most spectators scrambled to find the familiar door at the front of the nightclub, which caused many deaths and injuries as people were brutally crushed in the narrow hallway. Several survivors later testified that a bouncer at the station prevented people from escaping via the stage exit, stating that the door was for the band only. 1 minute and 50 seconds after the pyrotechnics began, video footage captured a pile of human bodies trapped in the front doorway, arms desperately extending out for help. Those still inside became trapped in a sweltering, thick black smoke that made getting out impossible. Now, while it's hard to pinpoint one single thing that made this fire so devastating, there were a few key factors at work that night, including the stifling bottleneck we just discussed. Moreover, the club owners advertised a capacity of 550, but the local fire marshal had only granted them a license to hold 404 people, not 462. Oh, but that's not all. The fireworks used by Great White are required by law to be handled by a licensed pyrotechnician and often require a preliminary safety demonstration with some precautionary efforts. Unfortunately, none of those measures were taken. So it's not hard to see how this tragedy could have been avoided, with some experts stating that even a sprinkler system would have made the fire survivable. All in all, a total of 132 people managed to escape the inferno unharmed that night, but the remaining 330 people in attendance weren't so lucky. The intense heat, toxic smoke, and the rush toward the exit claimed 100 innocent lives and gravely injured another 230. Great White's lead guitarist Ty Longley and the show's MC WHJY DJ Mike the Dr. Gonsalves were among those claimed by the blaze. However, many reports indicate that both men made it out of the building before re-entering in an attempt to salvage equipment. Not to mention, Many of those who made it out alive suffered severe post-traumatic stress disorder in the wake of this catastrophic event. The station nightclub fire is remembered in U.S. history as the fourth deadliest at a nightclub and the second deadliest in New England. 9 months after the fatal event, and following an extensive investigation, criminal charges were filed against Daniel Bakley and the Derderian brothers. All 3 men were charged with 200 counts of involuntary manslaughter, and all eventually took plea deals. Bakley and one of the owners went to prison, but both have since been released. The site of the deadly fire has now become a permanent monument, dubbed the Station Fire Memorial Park, where the public can come to mourn and remember those lost in the disaster. Our next photo might look like the perfect all-American family, but the horrible truth will shock you. Behind the seemingly innocent smile in this family portrait lies a ruthless killer just waiting for his next victim. Starting from the beginning, John Edward Robinson was born on December 27, 1943, in Cicero, Illinois, as the second of 5 children to an alcoholic father and a strict disciplinarian mother. In 1957, he was enrolled at Quigley Preparatory Seminary in Chicago. However, he dropped out after only 1 year due to disciplinary issues, something that would continue to be problematic into his adult years. In 1961, Robinson enrolled at Morton Junior College in his hometown with hopes of becoming a medical radiographer, but dropped out after 2 years. The following year, he moved to Kansas City, married a woman named Nancy Jo Lynch, and by 1971, the couple had 4 children together. Despite never graduating from college, Robinson used forged credentials to land several hospital jobs, one of which he was arrested for embezzling $33,000 from the practice. He was sentenced to 3 years probation, quite the slap on the wrist if you ask me, and to absolutely no one's surprise, he continued along the path of crime. All the while, he hid his dark side behind a wholesome persona, serving as the community scoutmaster, baseball coach, and Sunday school teacher. Anyways, throughout the 1970s, Robinson was arrested on several occasions for embezzlement and check forgery, but he managed to avoid jail time with the exception of one 60-day sentence. Additionally, Robinson had begun demonstrating an affinity for extreme fetishes. As a result, cracks were forming in his marriage to Nancy Jo, but she was determined to make it work for their children. Yet in the early 1980s, Robinson's behavior took a turn. In 1984, after establishing a bogus hydroponics business and 2 fraudulent shell companies, Robinson hired a 19-year-old writer and figure skater named Paula Godfrey to work for him as a sales representative. The young woman informed her loved ones that she was flying to San Antonio for training. But after several days with no contact, Godfrey's parents filed a missing persons report. Investigators questioned Robinson right away, but he denied any knowledge of her whereabouts, and after a typewritten letter arrived at her parents' house with Godfrey's signature at the bottom, the investigation into her disappearance was swiftly terminated. No trace of Paula Godfrey has ever been found. In 1985, Robinson started using the fake name John Osborne, and during this time he met 19-year-old Lisa Stacy and her 4-month-old baby girl, Tiffany, at a women's shelter called Hope House in Kansas City. A few days later, the con artist reached out to his brother and sister-in-law, who had been trying without success to adopt a baby, and told them he found a baby whose mother had taken her own life. Robinson charged them $5,500 in legal fees to adopt Tiffany, and as part of a startling new trend, Lisa Stacy was never seen or heard from again. Now, get this. The man dressed in yellow and beaming at the camera in this happy family photo is John Robinson. Oh, and the baby he's holding, that's Tiffany, the little girl he had just stolen from Lisa Stacy, who he presumably murdered. Meanwhile, Catherine Clampett, a 27-year-old mother, was hired by Robinson in 1987, and while not much is known about her personal life, she disappeared in June of that year. Her missing persons case is still open to this day. At long last, Robinson found himself incarcerated from 1987 to 1991 in Kansas on multiple fraud convictions, and from 1991 to 1993 in Missouri for an additional fraud conviction and several parole violations. However, during this time at the Western Missouri Correctional Facility, he met Beverly Bonner, the prison librarian, who dropped everything to move to Kansas with Robinson following his release. However, Robinson quickly orchestrated a plan to have her alimony checks forwarded to his post office box, and Bonner's family never heard from her again. Often referred to as the internet's first serial killer, Robinson took to social networking sites in the mid-90s under the screen name Slave Master and portrayed himself as a wealthy businessman and philanthropist searching for a submissive partner. That's how he met Sheila Faith and her 15-year-old daughter, Debbie, who suffered from spina bifida. The close-knit mother and daughter moved from California to Kansas City after Robinson offered to pay for Debbie's medical expenses. And yes, you guessed it, they were never seen alive again. In 1999, Robinson hired Izabela Lewiska, a young Polish immigrant and spectacular artist, as his personal slave. But like the others, she vanished without a trace shortly after. Around this same time, a licensed nurse named Suzette Troughton relocated from Michigan in response to the sick predator's online requests. But she went missing in no time flat. Growing increasingly careless with his crimes, the cold-blooded killer was arrested in 2000 for theft and battery. But authorities knew there was far more to the story after searching his farm near Lacine, Kansas. A task force recovered 2 decaying bodies on his property, identified as Izabela Lewiska and Suzette Troughton, stored in 85-pound chemical drums. 3 more bodies were discovered when searching a storage facility where Robinson rented 2 garages. They were later identified as Beverly Bonner, Sheila Faith, and her daughter Debbie. All of the women were reportedly killed in the same way: blunt force trauma to the head. In 2002, the longest criminal trial in Kansas history commenced as Robinson faced charges for the murders of Troughton, Lewiska, and Stacy. A jury found him guilty of the 3 murders in Kansas, and he was sentenced to death. Robinson also pleaded guilty in Missouri to the murders of 5 additional women, which landed him 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. However, both Kansas and Missouri police fear that there are countless undiscovered victims of this crazed madman. Still, as of 2021, he remains on death row at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. John Edward Robinson might have succeeded in fooling those around him into thinking he was nothing more than a charming, church-going family man. But after several long decades, justice was finally served when he was exposed as the sadomasochistic murderer he's always been. Baby Tiffany is now all grown up and a proud mother of boys. And as for the women who didn't survive their encounter with Robinson, their memories will live on forever in the hearts of those who loved them. Now, let's move on to yet another family photo with a backstory so shocking, it's sure to keep you awake at night. Not only did the horrific events in this story take place on Christmas Day, but they were at the hand of the person this family should have trusted most. As seen in this old portrait, the Lawson family consisted of Charles Davis Charlie Lawson, his wife Fanny, and their 7 children, Marie, Arthur, Carrie, Maybelle, James, Raymond, and Mary Lou, ranging in age from 17 to 4 months. They also had an 8th child named William, born in 1914, just after Arthur. But sadly, he died of pneumonia in 1920 at age 6. The family worked for years as tenant tobacco farmers, eventually earning enough money to buy their own farm in 1927 on Brook Cove Road in Germantown, North Carolina. By all accounts, the Lawsons were a typical working-class family, but that pleasant notion would soon change drastically. 2 weeks before Christmas, Charlie bought his entire family fancy new clothes in Winston-Salem, and together they posed for the now infamous family portrait. It was, he said, part of a Christmas surprise, which eerily alludes to his deadly plans and has led many to speculate that his actions were premeditated. On the morning of December 25, 1929, Maria woke early to start making her signature dessert for the holiday feast, one she would never get to finish. Meanwhile, Arthur asked his father for shotgun shells to hunt rabbits, but Charlie told him he was all out and deliberately sent his oldest son into town to buy more. Spoiler alert, Charlie had shotgun shells the whole time. 16-year-old Arthur was still at the store when he caught wind that something terrible had happened back at home. Charles's brother Elijah and his two sons stopped by the farm on their way home from hunting and discovered a brutal scene. Right there, in the tobacco barn, they found two young girls, Carrie and Maybelle, shot and bludgeoned to death. Fanny was lying on the front porch where she had been peeling potatoes, dead from a single shotgun blast to the chest, and Marie was inside, sprawled near the fireplace in a pool of blood. Horrifically, the two smallest boys, James and Raymond, attempted to hide but were beaten to death, along with their baby sister, Mary Lou. All of the bodies were then purposefully positioned with their arms crossed and rocks under their heads. Police and nosy locals alike descended on the scene, and everyone began searching for the missing patriarch. However, several hours later, a single shot rang through the crisp, cold air, signaling someone had taken their own life. The family's two beagles sprang into action without hesitation, leading Arthur and police directly to his body in the nearby woods. Footprints in the snow surrounding a tree close to his body indicated that Charlie had spent hours pacing in a circle before turning the gun on himself. Additionally, police uncovered some bizarre letters to his parents, and some sources say there was also a crumpled bit of paper which read the words, "Blame nobody but I." Several theories exist on the motive behind the massacre, including a traumatic head injury Charlie sustained just months before the event, and claims of abuse within the family. However, an autopsy and analysis of his brain at Johns Hopkins Hospital found no abnormalities at all. Moreover, while the rumors of possible inappropriate relations between Charlie and Marie are prevalent, it's pretty hard to confirm anything without hearing from those involved. Another popular theory is that Charlie had witnessed an organized crime, and as a result, he and his family were murdered to keep them quiet. Not so sure about that last one. As it stands, the world will probably never know what really happened on that not-so-jolly Christmas day in 1929. However, we do know that shortly after the murders, Charlie's brother, Marion Lawson, opened the old farmhouse on Brook Cove Road as a public tourist attraction. The whole Lawson family was buried in a single plot, with more than 1,500 curiosity seekers in attendance at their funeral. Tragically, the sole survivor of the familicide, Arthur, was killed in his early 30s in a freak truck accident, leaving behind a wife and 4 children. Over time, the spooky farmhouse was demolished, and people started to forget about the tragedy. Still, countless reports of strange phenomena in the Germantown area, including premonitions, curses, and ghosts, persist today and are widely attributed to the demonic actions of Charlie Lawson. Alright, let's move on. Joachim George Kroll, born in 1933, was the youngest of 8 children to a miner and housewife in Zabrze, Poland. When Kroll was just a few years old, his father was forced to join the military, and during World War II he was captured and became a prisoner of war in Russia. As a result, his mother and siblings moved to a rundown house in North Rhine-Westphalia, West Germany, never to know the true fate of their beloved patriarch. Now, we don't know a ton about his childhood, but several sources described Kroll as a frail and introverted boy with low intelligence who wet the bed beyond a normal age. He was also extremely dependent on and attached to his mother, who he lived with until she passed away in 1955. Kroll was 22 years old at the time, and by all accounts he simply lost control following her death. Of course, it's hard to pinpoint just one factor in determining what caused him to snap, but there's no denying that several of his early life experiences could have significantly contributed to the development of various psychiatric disorders. In February 1955, Kroll met Irmgard Strell, a 19-year-old runaway who he viciously assaulted, strangled, and stabbed 4 times in the neck. Her disemboweled body was found 5 days later in a barn in Ludenhausen. In June 1959, Kroll found his next victim, 24-year-old Clara Frieda Tesmer. She was walking down the road when he attempted to grab her arm, but when she fought back, he struck her in the head before strangling and assaulting her as well. Heinrich Ott, a local mechanic, was wrongly convicted of the crime and ultimately hanged himself in jail. The very next month, this bloodthirsty beast took yet another life when he encountered Manuela Knott in the city park of Essen. After strangling her to death, Kroll assaulted her body and carved slices of flesh from her buttocks and thighs. At this time, Kroll took a break from his killing spree to get an apartment and work as a restroom attendant. His neighbors and the local children had nothing but good things to say about the seemingly harmless man. But in April of 1962, he picked up right where he had left off. Kroll strangled 13-year-old Petra Geis with her own scarf before assaulting and partially butchering her body. A few months later, 12-year-old Monica Tafel was on her way to school when she suffered a similar fate at the hands of Joachim Kroll. The cruel predator killed her the same way he had the others. A man named Walter Quicker was wrongfully arrested for the crime, and while he was later released, he was driven to suicide by suspecting neighbors. Another murder of an adolescent girl named Barbara Bruder took place in 1962, although her body has never been found. And in 1965, Kroll claimed his first male victim, 25-year-old Hermann Schmitz. In September 1966, Ursula Rohling was strangled in Forsterbusch Park, and her boyfriend, Adolf Schickel, took his life after being falsely accused of the savage attack. And just 3 months later, Kroll hit an all-time low when he assaulted and drowned a 5-year-old named Ilona Hark. Oh, and care to hear the most sickening part of all? After every senseless murder, Kroll would cook the flesh of his victim and consume it in some sort of twisted ritual. Another span of silence came from 1966 to 1969, but it didn't last long because he ran into 61-year-old Maria Hetkin while on a walk and experienced what he described as a tickling feeling all over. Once again, Kroll strangled her until dead and assaulted her body. The following year, Jutta Rahn was exiting a train when she noticed someone following her through the wooded area leading to her house. She ran but was caught and strangled by Kroll, who left another innocent man, Peter Shea, to take the blame. Finally, in 1976, after killing 10-year-old Karen Topfer, Kroll was arrested while in the process of cooking body parts from his most recent victim, a 4-year-old girl named Marion Ketter. How did he finally get caught, you ask? Well, he had warned a neighbor in his apartment complex named Oscar not to use the top floor shared bathroom, stating that the toilet was blocked up with guts. So naturally, Oscar investigated and saw what appeared to be butchered remains and blood all over the toilet. In good Samaritan fashion, he called the police immediately. Investigators wasted no time questioning Kroll at his apartment, and they were shocked to their cores when he lifted the lid of his stew pot and exposed a small hand amidst the carrots and peas. Upon further examination, police recovered more human remains from his refrigerator, including those of the missing little girl. At long last, Kroll was put behind bars in July 1976, never once resisting arrest or proclaiming his innocence. Instead, he boasted that he often cooked his victims to save money on grocery bills. Kroll was so cooperative that, as you can see in this eerie picture, he had no problem reenacting his crimes for the police, even showing them exactly how he would overpower his victims. Despite confessing to 13 murders and 1 attempted murder over the past 2 decades, he was only charged with 8 murders and 1 attempted murder based on evidence. Kroll was given a life sentence in 1982, but in 1991, he died of a heart attack in the prison of Rheinbach. Our final photo speaks to the incredible dangers that come with being a bona fide daredevil and to the precautions that one should never overlook. While countless thrill seekers have attempted to traverse Niagara Falls over the years, few stories stand out like that of Robert Overacker. The 39-year-old California stuntman had dreamed of successfully conquering some of the world's most turbulent waters, until tragedy struck on his way down. But first, let's talk about who Robert Overacker, or Firecracker Overacker as he liked to be called, was and what motivated him to risk his life that day. For starters, this was a man who loved being labeled a daredevil, and that's all thanks to his passion for speed, stunts, and the spotlight. Overacker demonstrated an affinity for fast cars and living life on the edge from a young age, even bragging to friends about the dozens of speeding tickets he'd acquired. So it only makes sense that he attended stunt school, raced stock cars, and sold foreign cars for a living. By his late 30s, Robert Overacker had experienced more than his fair share of thrills. including a dramatic collision with another car during his last stock car race, just 10 days before his attempt at Niagara Falls. According to witnesses, he immediately climbed out of the car's window, stood on the hood, and did his version of a victory dance for the enthusiastic onlookers. If that's not a clear testament to how much he loved being a showman in the limelight, I don't know what is. Anyways, Overacker enjoyed all sorts of extreme activities, but going over Niagara Falls was the ultimate thrill. So, roughly 1 year before the endeavor, he went to the offices of the Niagara Parks Commission to request a permit to perform the stunt. However, he was quickly turned down by receptionist Mary Kay Morocco, who recalled him being very persistent in his pursuit. Oh boy, was she ever right. Not letting one refusal get in his way, Overacker then turned to George Bailey, communications director for the Niagara Parks Commission. After one meeting and 2 lengthy phone conversations, Bailey also denied him the permit, citing his concern for the use of a parachute based on the intensity of the winds over the falls. Additionally, the director admitted to feeling wary of Overacker's obvious lack of fear for the potentially fatal consequences. At the end of their last conversation, Bailey remembers saying, "I hope I don't wind up reading something bad about you in the newspapers." Overacker left without another word. And this adrenaline junkie didn't stop there. He was determined to make this dream a reality, not just for himself, but for a worthy cause as well. Overacker's desire to create waves in the media was about much more than simply adding yet another death-defying milestone to his ever-expanding resume. He aspired to use this prestigious platform to help raise awareness for the issue of homelessness. With that in mind, the strong-willed stuntman made 2 trips to the Canadian Falls with his brother, Michael Zurich, and his good friend, Christopher Yeoman, but both times he was talked out of attempting the feat. According to Niagara Parks police officer Jennifer L. Homan, they actually convinced him by pulling the spark plugs from his jet ski the second time. Nevertheless, Zurich and Yeoman made the final cross-country trek with Overacker to support him if anything should happen. On October 1st, 1995, the trio arrived at Niagara Falls equipped with a jet ski reading, "Save the Homeless." Mere hours before he hit the water, Overacker recorded a message regarding his intentions, stating, "I think the homeless situation and the way things are happening in this country is something that has to be rectified. I'm going to go out there and give it my best shot and see if we can make a difference in the United States." At approximately 12:35 p.m., Overacker entered the Niagara River near the Canadian Niagara Power Plant and started skiing towards the spectacular falls. He planned to deploy a rocket-propelled parachute at the brink that would safely guide him down to the river below for rescue, but sadly, that didn't happen. Instead, as a crowd of excited spectators, including his brother and friend, looked on, he went careening over the mighty Horseshoe Falls and fell 180 feet to his death. Unbeknownst to Overacker, the parachute had never been bound to his body, so it instantly fell out of reach when it was deployed. He hadn't packed the device himself before the stunt and was sorely unaware of the fatal error. Tragically, some spectators at first thought he had survived based on his movements in the water, but it was eventually discovered that the powerful rapids were making him appear alive. Robert Overacker was later recovered from the swirling current by the famous tour boat made of the mist and taken to Niagara General Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. In any case, Robert Overacker, an absolute legend, died doing what he loved that day, and our hats go off to his thrill-seeking spirit.